everyone. Welcome back to Life and Potted. This is Daisy here.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Sophie here. Thanks for joining us today.
And we are going to catch you up on a few announcements as usual. So don't forget, of course, we have the community Zoom upcoming tomorrow. So don't forget to register for that. It's an hour-long chat with us. You can go ahead and go down to the notes and register there. And it's just a great place to chat. We love to connect with everyone and have more in-depth conversation about what's going on in everyone's life, any kind of topics we want to discuss that are very specific. It all happens there. So don't forget to register. This is a reoccurring thing every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We're likely going to move that time to 7, but we'll let you know when we do that officially. And for today's episode, we have some really exciting things to discuss. So if you listened to last week's episode, you know that was pre-recorded because we were on a retreat. And that is what we were doing this past week. And we're recording this on Monday, the day before the release. So it's very fresh. All of our recognitions, realizations, clarity, all of that is really what we're going to discuss with you today from this retreat that we went on. And just for disclosure, just want to let you know, because we do talk about mushrooms, the psilocybin. We are not doctors. This is just our experience, and take things with a grain of salt because it's all just our experience. Everyone is different, but just want to make that caveat because this is our experience. So with all of that being said, welcome to season 3. This is the very newest season. We felt that this was the right time to commemorate jumping into season 3 because this retreat pushed us into a lot of realizations. A lot of things have changed. So I think the very nature of this podcast is about to change a little bit. And on that note, I will let Sophie kick it off.
I feel like it's a new season of my life. And like you said, Daisy, everything we're talking about with psilocybin and mushrooms, like we aren't doctors, and we went to a retreat and there was some level of supervision there and just the recognition again, like this is all just our experience. So I just think that's a really important caveat, but I feel like I have recognized more things about my past 29 years of my life than I ever have before. I reached this level of clarity where almost I was able to see my whole life, kind of zoom out from a bird's eye view and look back on my life and look back on all these things. And this happened during the mushroom trip, and it was very complex and it was over a certain day period. So there's a lot of realizations. I think they're just going to naturally unfold as we talk. But I just think the biggest thing maybe to start with, and the biggest thing for me is like, I am not who I thought I was. I've said this so many times before on the podcast. I've said this so many times before conceptually, but I really felt it this time that every single assumption I've ever made about how people viewed me or what people think about me, or just being so caught up in my head my entire life, thinking people are judging me and forming so many assumptions just about life, about how things are or what things mean and why things aren't the way they are. I think for the first time I kind of recognized that I've been kind of living in misery for the past 29 years. It might not have looked like that on the surface. You know, I've been pretty happy, I thought. I thought that life was pretty good. Things have been pretty good. Obviously, there's been ups and downs, but I haven't been happy because I've been self-sabotaging, making my life so much harder than it had to be. And the reason that was the case is because me, just like everybody else in this world, was born from a family and told all these things by your parents, by your peers, by the TV you watch, by the books you read, information after information, input after input, forming all these ideas that we have about who we are. And I started building up this narrative of Sophie and who that was. And she was this person that didn't do these things, or that people didn't think she was a certain way, and I could never be a certain way. And these things maybe sound, I don't know, maybe not as much of a big deal, but they have driven literally every single way that I have interacted with the world. There's a lot more to say. This is going to be like a process of getting the thoughts out, but that's just, I am not who I think I was, and nobody is who they think they are, because what we really are is not something we can even explain in words. It is not something we can even explain through concepts. We'll do the best we can through this podcast and through conversations we have with people and through conversations we have in life. But I had a huge relief recognizing that everything's okay. And it always has been, but it's just taken me a really long time to recognize that.
So another thing to say is, so Sophie and I, we do this podcast together. We're dating. We have a lot of things in common. But we had very different experiences when we went to this retreat and we took mushrooms, and we both had our own insights because we are different people. We're separate people. But it's kind of interesting because we always say like our self, our identity, who we are. I'm different. They're different. This and that. And one of the biggest things I recognized, well, I would say two of the biggest things, but I'll go with the first one, is that I did finally understand that we are all connected. And you hear that a lot. It's cliche, but it's real. I recognize that we are nature. Nature is us. Everything that nature does is connected to what we do. And what I mean by that is that we are infinitely powerful. All of these ideas that we've created about who we think we are, what society has told us we can only be certain things, but we are abundant. Nature doesn't have anyone monitoring or policing saying you can do this, you can't do this. It just is, and that's enough. And that was a huge recognition that I had. The second one, and these things are hard to talk about because, like Sophie said, it's more of a feeling, it's more of an understanding. And I've been trying to understand this stuff for 2 years. And it wasn't until this moment. And also with mushrooms, it's taken me a full, year and a half of microdosing to finally get to a place where, I was nervous as hell, but I was comfortable with fully tripping. I say comfortable with a grain of salt because it's never comfortable. I cried before I took mushrooms because I was like, oh man, what am I going to see? But it's the truth. And that's what everyone, sees with mushrooms is the truth. Eventually, every experience is different, but I think ultimately it helps lead you to the truth. And with truth comes a lot of pain, but as they all say, the truth will set you free. And once you see the truth, you don't want to go back. But leading me back to my second point that I realized was that we can turn our thinking on and off. We don't have to think. Just how nature does and is and flows and goes and does everything, we can do the same thing. We just get in our own way. Things that trigger us, we can recognize to have awareness between that and it playing out into a way in our lives that doesn't feel good anymore. Like we have the full ability to say, oh, I'm not going to think about that right now. And that is some major relief and some major control amongst all these things. Everything we talk about seems to, it's just funny because we say we are uncertainty, we have uncertainty, but in a way, when we let uncertainty happen by saying, I'm not going to think about this, you have a sense of control over not letting your brain think too much. So I don't know, everything's very contradictory, but I just kind of want to leave it at, I'm excited to explore this topic more deeply because kind of like Sophie said, I recognized, especially the last 3 years, they've been a whirlwind of things, but it's been a whirlwind of good, bad, extreme, crazy things. But ultimately that led me to this moment. So I'm super grateful for it. But, now that I've realized that I don't have to think about these things that make me miserable, like life truly feels infinite.
There's so much to unpack here. And I think specifically with one thing that you said is resonating with me is kind of talking about all the fear that came up when taking mushrooms, right? So much fear comes up. And it's really funny because the irony of it all is we become, so mushrooms is different than I think a lot of other substances because they make you go inward. Yes, of course, you can have like visuals and hallucinations. I didn't have anything like that in my experience. For me, it was just purely going deeply, deeply inward. But with that, we feel so scared sometimes. And I felt so scared to take the mushrooms because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to see. I don't know what's going to come up. And kind of just like what you said is just like all they are doing is showing you the truth that we've been running from our whole life. It's almost like we all deep down know that there are things that we're so scared of. And to break them down to two parts, my trip that I experienced was my fear of death, my fear of dying, and all these things I ever thought about myself. And during the trip, I really looked and confronted all of those things. And it was really uncomfortable. It was really, really scary and really painful. And we can go into more of the specific experience later, but just afterwards was a giant release. It was like the past 29 years of my life came up from deeply, deeply suppressed in me. And I was able to see on the other end of it that there's so much clarity. And this goes beyond the recognition that when saying that we're not what we think we are, this goes beyond the recognition of, you thought you weren't smart and you are smart. This goes way beyond that. This is like a very deeply spiritual recognition that we as human beings have a deeply profound power to basically dictate how our life turns out. And I just want to read a quote from the book I'm reading, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, because I just think it really summarizes a pivotal part of one of my recognitions that I had during the trip. There is so much evidence that life does quite well on its own. The planets stay in orbit, tiny seeds grow into giant trees, weather patterns have kept forests across the globe watered for millions of years, and a single fertilized cell grows into a beautiful baby. We are not doing any of these things as conscious acts of will. They are all being done by the incomprehensible perfection of life itself. All these amazing events and countless more are being carried out by the forces of life that have been around for billions of years. The very same forces of life that we are consciously pitting our will against on a daily basis. If the natural unfolding of the process of life can create and take care of the entire universe, is it really reasonable for us to assume that nothing good will happen unless we force it to? It is the exploration of this intriguing question that this book is devoted. There's a lot more that he says on this, but this was really the core recognition that I had that there is this giant source beyond us. Some people call it God. Some people call it just the universe that has manifested or has created this beautiful existence that we call life. It's so easy to not recognize that. And even to the level of our hearts are beating and our food is digesting and we can see and we can hear and we can smell and we have brains. And not even beyond that, but the fact that trees grow and strawberries grow and blueberries grow and sunflowers, all these things, and there's ants and there's birds and there's sharks and there's this whole entire ecosystem, right? But for some reason, we forget that we're connected to that. And we create this whole idea that we're small, that we are this small human who can't do anything in this world. But when I was tripping and afterwards, I had this sense of clarity and a sense of comfort of saying, wow, I can basically do anything I want in this existence. And Michael Singer in this book goes on to talk about the fact that, in all these books I'm reading, is that whatever is digesting your food, whatever is making your heart beat, is that same source. It's that same energy field. It is that same power that is responsible for a small tree growing into a giant oak tree. And I think this recognition has been profound for me because I have realized that I have spent so much of my life getting in the way of life working its own course by resisting, by thinking the way things are going is not the right way to be happening. My opinions, my preferences, all these things that I think. But when in reality, there's no shoulds or shouldn'ts among nature. And look how beautifully it all pans out. So what if we were to apply that same logic to our human lives of not getting in the way of things that are just naturally working out? I'm starting to think, and as what's happening with this podcast and what's happening kind of magically with all of this growth happening in our lives right now, what is the one change that's been happening? I've let go. I'm not resisting anymore. I'm trusting. And then slowly and slowly you start to see that external world you were blaming everything on. Oh, I just can't succeed. I just can't do that. Oh, nothing's working. Nothing's working. Have you ever really given life a chance to work out for you? Because I certainly haven't.
So I think this episode is a very unique episode because you might feel us warming up because the things we're processing right now from this experience we had coming back into real life, like these are really big recognitions. And I think right now is a really big shift for us because in a way we've reprogrammed our brains and we're starting to start from scratch, like wiping the slate clean. We're kids again. You know, when you're a kid, your brain is so malleable. And I don't think our brain's so malleable right now, but I think that we're starting to see things very differently. So I think we're taking a slow approach because we're figuring out, well, how do I make this sound different than what we always talk about? Because from someone who's listening, you may not be able to feel what we're feeling, the way you're not able to see the way that we see it. So I'm questioning, you know, how do we make sure that we make these recognitions consumable and noticeable? You know, so that's really what I'm thinking about right now. And I'm to go a little deeper from what you said. I think you painted a really great picture of specifically talking about the things we take for granted: giant strawberry fields, apple trees, these amazing things that we don't know how a tree grows. We know how a tree grows, but we don't know where this started. We don't know how we're able to have animals that give us all the protein we need, all the vitamins and minerals. These are wondrous things that we've started to take for granted and we've started to commercialize. But when we take a step back and where we are reprogramming our brains, we're like, wow, everything just is and everything is working. It's once the human mind got in control of these things and got in the way maybe of things just happening naturally, we started to think. I think, therefore I am. Well, maybe that isn't true. Maybe thinking is something that's oversaturated in our society. And that's been the biggest recognition for me. And I'm probably going to say this multiple times in this episode because I have a new awareness around I just don't have to think about that. You are not what you think you are. And that's something that we've also said in this episode. But truly, it's a very, 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 very important concept because you aren't what you think you are. And you don't have to be anything at all. And that is so freeing. And I've probably said this on past episodes. I'm just super heightened right now about sounding different or more in a way that's aligned with how I'm feeling. But it's interesting because these things are very much still processing. So I just don't know how to communicate. You know, you aren't what you think you are. The thoughts you're having that are causing your pain, you don't have to think those thoughts. If it's something that is consistently happening, you're waking up and you're thinking, oh, like my job, I have to take the dog out, I have to go pick up my shirt from the tailor, like random, like, you know, everyday things. You can do all of those things and you can feel really happy about it. The reason why those things are making you feel like really crappy is because there's something in your life. There's probably an emotion you're not processing. There's probably something that you are going over in your mind over and over and over and over. Like going to your job means, oh, you know, I want to leave this job, or I want to get promoted, or, you know, there's like, it's like all of these things. It's like, it's detaching from why do I hate what I'm doing to what do I think about what I'm doing, and why do I hate what I'm thinking about, and oh, why do I have to think about that in the first place? That is true. Now I can just turn the light switch off and stop thinking about it. It's accepting how things are, doing them, but not consistently thinking about them. Allowing yourself to think about and worry about something for 5 minutes and be like, well, why did I even spend 5 minutes worrying or thinking about that? So this is a huge thing for me, I think, right now. And I just recognize that everyone is lost in their thoughts. At some point, everyone has been lost in their thoughts. And your thoughts don't have to control you.
There's so much more to this reality than just your thoughts. And I fully experienced that on mushrooms. That logic, left brain. I was listening to this podcast called Buddha at the Gas Pump that our friend Lexi shared with us, where they interview a lot of spiritually awoken people, and they're talking from a science perspective about the left brain and the right brain, and how the left brain, we overuse it. It's so logic based. We try to calculate every single thing in our life to try to understand it from a logic standpoint, from a list standpoint. The right brain, more creative, more intuitive. Creativity doesn't always require thought. In that same book I was reading, he was just talking about this whole experience he had of where this boost of creativity came out of stillness and silence. And from relating this back to the mushroom trip and to the recognition that we're both having is that this clarity is almost not one that you can put into words because it's a feeling state. And for somebody who hasn't done mushrooms and maybe you've meditated, right? In meditation, we can reach a point where when you've let go fully of resisting what you're feeling, you enter to a state where you're just being and you're truly, truly, truly just being. And it's like this giant wave of love rushes through your body and a giant relief of, oh, I can let go. But it's not even like you hear those words. You feel a feeling state. And I would equate mushrooms and what they do for you to be similar because it's almost like this inner knowing. We start connecting with this inner knowing. And maybe intuition is a good word for that. Maybe it's like your higher self. Maybe it's your deep self or, whatever you want to call it. But we all have an inner knowing. And I connected with that. And it was just bliss and peace and calmness, tranquility. And the reason that was there that I saw so clearly in that moment was the recognition that I don't have to spend my life thinking about everything so much. I don't have to spend my life thinking about everything so much. We can just, like water, flow with life, be in life, dance with life, not dance against life. And it's just like taking on this new sort of rhythm of stop analyzing everything, stop thinking about everything, stop calculating everything, stop worrying about everything. And the biggest recognition that I had was the funniest thing about it is that we think that thinking is going to get us somewhere. Because life has showed us in many, many scenarios that logic works. Logic works for numbers. Logic works for, I'm going to think about this job and I'm going to go to undergraduate school, then I'm going to go to graduate school, I'm going to get this job. Very formulaic. But when you look out into the trees and the clouds, where's the logic there? You see numerous variations existing in nature that happen so beautifully. And we all complain that our life just isn't working out the way it is. And I fully understand now that a large part of that is because we are resisting by thinking too much.
Well, it's interesting because you don't even always realize that you're thinking. Sometimes it's like so disconnected that it's just something that's like there. And when you realize, I'm so used to thinking these things that make me miserable that they're not even necessarily thoughts, they're just feelings. And I think that's a really important differentiator is that when we say you don't have to think all the time, it's not even that you are going to be having conscious thoughts. Sometimes it's like a feeling state that you get trapped into, but that's through the mind. The mind is actively being like, oh, I'm going to feel angry right now because I'm frustrated and I'm annoyed and because this moment isn't what it should be. This moment isn't what I want it to be. Everything is going downhill from here. Well, that's not true. That's not actually happening in this reality. You can just say, hey, I'm actually going to pull the plug on that feeling and I'm going to let it go because there is no expectation. There is no reality. Trees don't look at each other and say, you're wrong. You're doing it wrong. Your roots look wrong. It's not how it is. Everything just is, and we don't ever have to be anything. And we put so much pressure on ourselves and so much suffering, coincidentally, that comes with that because we're so upset that things should be a certain way. And in reality, real reality, when we're looking at real reality, and that's something that mushrooms help you do, is it helps you peel yourself back and forget that you exist because you're so busy existing with reality. And that was what I recognized. I was sitting in a backyard and I was looking at a tree and I was like, holy shit, I'm not thinking about myself. I see my legs, but they're not. I don't identify with my legs. Like I have this connection with this tree right now. And it's giving me the recognition that I am nature. We are one and the same. The reason the tree is here is the same reason we are here. And we've loved to create this whole idea that we own the trees. We can buy trees. We can plant trees the way we want. We can control them. We can cut them down and make firewood. We can make a house. But that's all just an illusion. That's the human illusion that we've created. The real reality is that we are all here just existing as we are. And the reason we've all gone insane, we've all gone crazy, is because we have created these so many illusions in our head of how things should be. And that is what creates all of our suffering. And that's really what I've recognized, is that any moment I can cut whatever is making me suffer. You know, there's a difference between feeling and processing emotions in real time or from the past, but there's a place and time for both of those things. But most of the time, those are not what are making us suffer. It's what we are actively holding on to that's making us suffer, because we are enjoying it in some way, because we're enjoying the illusion, because something in society or something in ourselves is saying, yes, like, let's suffer more. But it's all just an absolute illusion, and it's not what reality actually is. And once we get a sense of reality and we get to step outside of ourselves and not have to like be so miserable like in who we are and just all the exhausting things that come with being in the illusion, why would you ever want to go back? Because reality is where things happen. Really good things happen.
Well, we cling to this illusion because we would rather a illusion that feels certain than uncertainty. And I just want to use an example from the retreat that really paints this picture. I really recognize how many assumptions I form about other people. How many assumptions, whether I think somebody is a certain way or somebody is thinking about me or everything. What I truly learned is that every single thing I think is a projection of myself. Everything. And if we want to go all the way down on a scientific route from the brain, in the sense of saying that you are really alone in this life because all you are seeing is what your brain is projecting. And that's true, right? And that's what I really experienced from tripping. But that's not really the point I'm trying to draw here. So we have a friend from the retreat who I have definitely, in my head, formed some sort of image about him, you know, boxing him into this box subconsciously and consciously. And I became aware of this judgment that I had. And it wasn't a bad thing, but it was just the way that we assume, for example, that a certain guy who looks a certain way is a certain type of person and feels a certain way and isn't someone who cries often and isn't somebody who's in pain and isn't somebody who experiences the feelings that I might feel. And that entire bubble popped after retreat because I saw him cry deeply and I saw him connect with this pain that's been with him from a teenager. And it was as if I saw this entire bubble crumble of assumption, of thinking that I was who he thought he was, when in reality, he was none of that. That was just my own perception, me clinging to this certainty, convincing myself that he was this person, because that was all I ever knew from the world. And it's just so interesting how we might not even realize it or not, but we cling to these beliefs about other people because they offer us a sense of certainty. I think we're kind of we are all deep down scared of uncertainty, but life is inherently uncertain. And what I realized though from this example, from seeing him as him, beyond any concept or narrative I ever had about him, was that he's just the same as me. He experiences the same exact pain as me. Yes, his life experience is very different and he's not going through the same things I'm going through. We have unique experiences, but we all share this human experience together and we're a lot more similar than you may think.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. We're all this, that's the same thing of where we came in and we were like, oh, you know, nature's doing its thing, but we're going to come in and we're going to use our human minds and we're going to create a factory where we can produce all these things. So nature doesn't have to do its thing. We're going to manipulate it and we're going to play like we have the control, like we know what is best. And we're going to create hierarchies. We're going to create this apple is better than that apple. Why? Because we made it up. And that's the same idea of we look at all these different people from different cultures, from different ages, from different socioeconomic classes, from different backgrounds. from different experiences. And we're like, we're different because of this. And we're different because they had a different experience. They don't understand, or they're better, or they're worse, or we've created all of these things that are all bullshit. And I think when you do take mushrooms specifically with a group of people who are open to seeing the truth, it's heightened because you're able to recognize that we are not different. We are actually one and the same. We are actually made of the same particles, the same everything. We are the same person. And once you're with people who let go of that idea of who they think you are, that's when I really recognize that no one is different from me. The only reason people feel different from me is because they have an idea of who they think they are. And that's hard to connect with someone when they're thinking, oh, I'm this and I'm that, so I can't, and this and blah, blah, blah. When in reality, when you see someone who doesn't think those things about themselves, why do you think they feel familiar? Because they're you. I feel like whenever I have a connection with anyone, I'm like, why do they seem so familiar? Why do I feel like I know them? It's because we're all the same. And when people aren't trying to be anything and they let you in, they let you see you as they are, you're just seeing yourself. And I think that is beautiful because there's so much fun to be had of letting go, of not thinking about yourself. That's when real magic happens, real creativity flows, real things just exist, and you're not in your mind. You're not in your false reality making stories up.
It's interesting when we talk about thinking about yourself, I think it's easy to think about that in a way of, oh, I'm thinking about myself, I don't know how to explain it. We are thinking about ourselves in every single thing we do to the point that we don't recognize it. You meet somebody new, you feel awkward around them because you're convinced that they don't like you. This happened to me at the retreat. So many times where I meet somebody and I think they're thinking a certain thing. I have been so convinced my whole life that was actually what's happening. I was so convinced my whole life that was reality. And it became this self-fulfilling prophecy that I would act a certain way around other people, or I would do this, or I would do that. Because I was thinking about myself so much. I was thinking about them thinking about me. When in reality, they are not thinking about me because they're thinking about themselves too. But you can start to form these relationships with people that you're not thinking about yourself. They're not thinking about themselves. And what do you have after that? Just fun and joy and happiness and excitement, realness.
So this insight is so fascinating because this is a great example. When you get to a retreat where you're like, I don't know anyone here, I maybe know a few people. This is a new area for me. We're about to take mushrooms. What is going on? All of these things are super uncomfortable. And you see how everyone is kind of tense. Everyone has their masks on of, I'm different than you. You're dressed different than me. You look different from me. You are from a different state than me. You're from a different country than me. You like your brain, when it's uncomfortable, it divides you from other people because you're like, like you associate them with the uncertainty and the discomfort, and you're like, and you really sense that energy when people are uncomfortable. And then fast forward 2 days, a day after everyone's let go, or just fast forward to the end of the retreat and everyone's friends, everyone's like hanging out, everyone is just having a good time. And that's because everyone's forgot about themselves. That's what life's about, forgetting about yourself. And after seeing that and experiencing that, I see that with everything we do now. And Sophie and I didn't mention it was Sophie's birthday today, but it is. So wish her happy birthday. It's her 30th. It's a very big one. We were celebrating her birthday, and we went to this event. It was hosted in this woman's kitchen, and it was a cultural event where she showed us how to cook Argentinian food. And you saw it immediately. You walk, of course, this is the quintessential example. You walk into someone's home who you don't know with a bunch of people you don't know. Why are you all here? What are you all doing? And you look at everyone, and there's the judgments that come up. Oh, I see that person as that person because they have their mask on. I'm doing the same thing. And then fast forward an hour, everyone's like, hand me the spatula. Hand me the steak because I'm going to put it on the oven. Like everyone's just all of a sudden like doing something together, and you forget about who you are entirely. I'm sure it's an experience like listeners can relate to, is once you get immersed in something, you forget about yourself. You forget about who you are, and you become fused as one with everyone that you're doing something with. I think that's kind of the whole point. I think that's kind of what everyone is trying to get at through different means, is that entirely, is that we are not different at all. We're all just one, but all of these thoughts and ideas get in the way of us remembering that.
And the reason why you might feel so uncomfortable around kind of people who you're like, oh, they just feel a little closed off, or they just feel a little tense. They must not like me. And the reality of it is that they're just thinking about themselves. And you can sense this energetically when you spend time with people who are nervous or who are kind of caught up, worried about how they might look. And it's funny because then you, the person perceiving them, you feel like they don't like you. The reality of it is that no one's actually thinking about you. And the only reason you think that they might feel uncomfortable with you is because they're caught up in their own shit.
Definitely. Absolutely. And that is when you are so caught up in whatever you want to call it, the matrix, how things should be, that you continue to believe that everything as you think it is, or everything your thoughts tell you as it is exactly how it is. And it's easy to think that. It's so easy to get caught up in it. I mean, I've been caught up in it my entire life. And in the last couple of years, I've been trying to get out of it, been trying to figure it out. But it's the whole concept of like, you can't fix problems of the mind through thinking, through the mind. You have to let go of it altogether. That's been my biggest recognition, because the more you try to think yourself out of a problem, you're just going to perpetuate being within the problem. It's thinking, this problem, I've been thinking about it for a long time. It doesn't seem to be serving me anymore. Why don't I take a break from thinking about this altogether? And I think I mentioned this earlier, but there's two different types. There is the thinking of the mind, and there is also the feeling state that comes with thinking. And that is the one, that's like the kicker, I feel like, that really keeps you feeling like you're stuck, makes you feel like you can't get out, is because the feelings that are associated with the things that you're thinking, it makes you feel like you have no control over them anymore, that you have no control of how you're feeling, or you just feel this malaise, or you just feel whatever it may be.
But I also think it's really important to recognize that the reason why I think it's so hard to have these recognitions is because we have years and years and years of worth of emotions that have been suppressed. And the thing with mushrooms, what they do is they take, for example, 29 years of my life, maybe the past 20, and woof, everything comes up within a matter of 30 minutes. Anything you're trying to avoid feeling, anything you don't want to feel is going to come up. So of course, we're going to be unable to recognize our true nature. We're not going to be able to recognize this truth within us when we're driven by emotions that have not been healed. And I think this is where the crossing over with healing comes in. Of like, these are just side by side. Like, healing and recognizing your true potential and who you are goes side by side, because if we don't process and fully feel these emotions from 10 years ago or 5 years ago or last week, they're going to continue to dictate our life. And what happens when you trip, or for me, when I took 3 grams, was that I felt extreme discomfort. And it felt so unfamiliar. I was like, what is this? Like, this is so scary. Like, I feel so scared. I feel so uncomfortable. I just feel awful, honestly. Like, I felt like I was dying. And in a way, I kind of did feel like I died, because it was like I let go of everything in that moment. And naturally, after that, after we let go of all this pain we've been holding on to for so long that we're not even consciously aware of it, because we can't think through pain a lot of the time. It's something we have to feel, and feeling it feels so shitty and uncomfortable. So it's like life has been so complicated, but it doesn't really need to be. And I think if I was going to like simplify life into 2 parts, I would say we have all this shit that has happened to us by nature of being alive, and that is implicated the way we view reality, has gotten in the way of us being able to recognize our true potential. And once you work on that and you're working through that, you can get to the other side of it and saying, holy crap, I'm limitless. And I can do anything I want with this life. And I think the reason why this recognition matters about being everything and being one is because you have no limits. You can achieve anything you want to achieve. You can build or start a business or move to a new country or do anything you want to do. The only thing getting in your way is you thinking that you can't, and also resisting the force of life that will work for you. The synchronicities that will happen when you let go, the people that you will meet. But if you're continuously fighting against yourself and continuously fighting against the force of life, say you plant a seed to grow a tree. And every single day you have somebody who's like coming there and like, it hasn't grown yet. And you're hitting it and you're hitting the seed. And the seed bursts eventually, and it doesn't grow. It doesn't take that natural course. But what if instead you say, I'm going to plant the seed and I'm going to come back and check on it in 1 year? Imagine if we were like, okay, I'm going to let my life flow for an entire year and I won't judge it. I won't have any issues with it. I'm just going to flow through it. I'm not going to let the mind ruin it. What do you think would happen? And we're seeing now with our podcast and everything happening in life is that what happens is everything works out beautifully in the same way that our entire ecosystem has been created since the start of existence. What makes you think you would be anything different than that?
And it's not easy. I think we have seen the contrast of, I mean, for me particularly, going on this retreat and then coming back to real life, you're like, oh my God, there's constant triggers that make you want to go into your brain and think all this bullshit that makes you unhappy, that limits you, that makes you think you can't do this, and you have to feel miserable right now, or you have to feel a certain way. It's because you think. And I saw the contrast so clear coming back from the retreat, because I was just like, why am I back in my apartment? Why am I back to where life is? And why do I feel like it's a constant battlefield? And that really showed me like, oh my God, I've been fighting myself for the past 28 years, fighting for my life against myself, fighting at myself, fighting, thinking. And it's also like, it's one of those things where you just realize, poof, you don't have to do that. But it doesn't mean you don't still do that. It means that you have the active decision a minute into thinking how you feel so crappy and you feel so this and that you're like, oh, I'm actually not going to do that. And I think a really interesting thing is that routine can really keep you in this. I know a lot of people talk about routine and how they love their routine. And hey, maybe your routine is great. But I think with routine, we sometimes do the same thing with our thoughts and with our mind, meaning that you don't give yourself the freedom to go and just let go. I think routine and rigidity are, they kind of are of the same plant. And with that comes kind of telling yourself, all right, it's 9 to 5 for work. So I have to work. So I'm going to feel a certain way. And I feel like when you're in a certain routine and a certain rigidness comes up, you're kind of getting in the way of how things just tend to work out. Your thoughts are getting in the way of that. But it just really, this experience, and I think mushrooms really exemplify turning your brain off. And like Sophie said, like instead of thinking about how you're feeling and all the things that you've experienced in your life, you just feel them. And yeah, your brain's there telling you this and that, but you're truly like just like feeling them and processing them. And I don't think that is really apparent. That process, that experience is apparent in typical day-to-day life. And sometimes you do just have to shatter things. Like we were on a podcast a few days ago, and I brought up, and I was just like, logic doesn't make sense. Logic does make sense in the idea of I'm going to put on 5 pounds of muscle. So I'm going to cut this amount of calories and I'm going to go to the gym this amount of days. So yes, that example of logic makes sense. But you would say it's not logical. Say if you're someone who just got a new mortgage and you just got a new car and you just got a new job and you just got all these new things. Logic is going to tell you, even if you don't like this life that you've created, well, you still have expenses and you still have roots and you still have a career ladder to climb. So even if you don't like it, you got to stay. And I think the biggest misconception with anyone with any background is if you say, I hate this and it feels illogical to find a way to step away from this and to go do something new. But if you really are like, I'm going to figure out a different way, this is where logic doesn't reign. Logic is not the supreme. Logic is not the best way to live your life. Like your intuition is something you have to follow. And logic and intuition sometimes are at odds with each other. And that's why you can't live your life by a belief system. You can't live your life by looking to someone else tell you what to do, an idol, a mentor, all of these things that, help quote unquote guide you in your life. You have to look to yourself because it's your intuition. And this is another thing of all the power is in you if you choose to listen to yourself and if you choose to allow that nature to unfold and to listen to it. And that's another thing, is that doesn't mean it's not going to be easy. Like when we took mushrooms aren't a walk in the park. It's forcing yourself to look at all the things that you've avoided looking at. But once you look at them, they're no longer as scary. And I think that's the same thing of this whole example I just gave of logic and wanting to leave your life if you built it. This life is short, and I think it's so easy to get caught up in these concepts of what we should and shouldn't be doing. But it's all just happening, whether we do one path or we do another. Life is happening. So if we want to live in our minds and live in this illusion and create a lot of suffering, we can do that. But if we say, there's got to be more to life than this, I want to actually live a full freaking life, you can let go of all of that and you can live in reality. You can live right here, right now. But that might mean you have to cross a bridge to get there. And that bridge might be on fire with dragons below it. Like that is what our life is about. It's about crossing that bridge. Whatever that may look like, that's going to look like different for everyone. But mushrooms really taught me you really can't have the good without the pain, because you have to experience. It's all just there. And you can't just make your life so comfortable and so easy and so great that you're going to feel these extreme, immense feelings of joy if you're just avoiding all that pain and pushing it away and pushing all that fear away. Your intuition might be telling you to light your life on fire and go start a new one. And that's walking the bridge. And that's just the example I always give because it's relatable to mine. But that can look a million different ways, right? That can look any way, shape, or form. Anything that gives you the chills or makes you nervous or makes you anxious, like go for it. And I have a new meaning of that. I have a new understanding of that because it's what life is about. And I think I'm starting to understand or remember everything from the trips and everything of my like takeaways. And I think another one is when you look at the great books of our time, the great Disney movies of our time, all of these literature and all these books that try to make sense of the life that we have here. And our modern society has kind of gotten to a point where it is calculated, where there is the perfect equation to live the perfect life, like the American dream. I think that feels real for many, and in a lot of ways is real, but something that is good never lasts, and things stop making sense. And that might not be something that still fully exists in the way that it used to exist. And maybe it's time to carve a new path and to figure out new things. But what I was going to say with the example of the literature and the books, it's that it seems like everyone was like on this great quest to figure out, why am I here? And I think the answer to that is to not run from your pain, to not run from your fears, and to face them head on so you can actually exist in this reality. That's the gift. And that's life. That's my opinion.
And to stop trying to figure everything out. Stop trying to think you can figure everything out. We can't figure out life. There's nothing to kind of figure out. Like the point is just to be here. There's nothing you have to do. I mean, in the sense of we don't need to change it. Everything is beautifully, perfectly working out the way exactly it should be. So it's about making the decision that you're going to stop getting in the way of that. Give it a chance. Let go. Focus on where your feet are at. Take one foot at a time, one step at a time. Because we need to stop manipulating our environment. We need to stop manipulating situations so that we just feel better. We think we feel better. We never actually do. Everything's going to eventually crumble. Everything does crumble. Everything you have held on to just for an idea will always be just an idea. And why are belief systems so malleable and so subject to change and lead to so much suffering? Because there's no inherent value within them. Everything that is true is here. That is that we're infinitely full of love and peace, and that is life, and that is nature, and everything else that we've created that are just these concepts, these ideas that we think that we can box our existence as an idea that we can pinpoint why and how and where to go, instead of just saying, hey, I am that force that exists in every single one of us. And I trust that. I don't need my mind. I don't need the logical mind, I will say. We need our brains, obviously, but I don't need the logical mind to give me a logical answer for an existence that is inherently so complex and so magical. Because in a way, we're completely undermining it if we try to dumb it down with logic. Because it's so pure and it's so beautiful. And I think that's all it really is. And letting go, and we're doing this with this podcast, letting go, not worrying, trusting. I am so confident in uncertainty. I'm starting to like love being uncertain, because I realized that there was no truth in certainty. It was just a mask. It was just a mask that I was trying to cling on to feel better, thinking that that was truth. But in reality, none of that was ever truth. And we will eventually learn that. And if we don't ever learn it, it will just manifest through suffering and pain, through misery. So if we can just try to let go of who we think we are, of what we think we can accomplish, we will see life start magically working out in beautiful ways that you never, ever, or at least your logical brain never thought was possible. Because magic isn't logic. It just is.
Well, can you explain why we're here?
Right. It's all another one.
You can't explain that through logic.
Like, I just love how we're just like born into Earth, and nothing makes any sense. Like, we didn't even know of the Big Bang, what happened, how did existence come to be, but we just are just like, everything sucks. Really?
Well, I think it's funny because the way that we've been educated on history, it's that the past was where, they figured it out. So we're good now. Like, they've all figured it out. So, we're in the modern ages. So we know everything. But like, that's the biggest lie. No one knows anything. Yeah, we have ideas. We have theories. We have concepts. We have ideas. But like,
everyone's been saying the same shit throughout time. That's what religion is. Every single religion basically says like, you are everything.
Right.
But it's like, oh, let's try to figure it out again. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, we can just stop thinking.
Yeah. I just feel like, I definitely felt like pressure in the beginning of the episode, because I'm like, there's so much to explain about this experience that I just think has to naturally come out.
Well, that's why it's a full season.
That's why it's a full season. So this season might just be unpacking the retreat.
I think so. Yeah, well, I also thought that too. And I was thinking, wow, like, it's been a full week since we've been home from the retreat.
We haven't been podcasting in like 2 weeks.
No, we haven't, but it's been a full week since we've been back from the retreat. So we're fully back in life now. We're back in the shit of it. And we are on a podcast, a few days last Friday after we got back from the retreat. So I was like, I was in my head. I was like, wow, like I know I sounded a lot better on that podcast, recounting the retreat, recounting my lessons.
I was thinking that about myself too.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's, why I was like thinking and talking. I was like, the reason this episode may not be the same as that episode, because they can never be the same. It's a different moment, but it's also because I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this moment should actually be that moment. And I'm here getting in the way of just letting things be.
I definitely feel like I got in the way of this episode. I mean, it probably doesn't sound that way, but I was definitely in my head. But that's life too.
It is. That's the whole thing. It's like, there are no expectations on things, how things should be, because that's where we ruin things and we get in the way, and we're not immune to that. We're here trying to get out of that. We're trying to be aware of that so that we're never immune. Well, we are never immune to it. It's just becoming more aware of it so that we can have it within arm's length of us. So it's not us unconsciously taking up space, at least now, we've gotten feedback on these episodes that you can feel us being like, fighting at the beginning, and at the end it's kind of, we've let go. And I do feel that way right now. So, at the least, hopefully people feel that and feel a part of that, right? Because they are that.
Well,
they are
us.
Of life. That's the journey of
Letting
life.
Go.
Yeah. So
until you start holding on again and the cycle repeats.
Right. That's why this podcast is fun and interesting, and everyone's always in a journey, and we're just honest with it. So this has been.
Well, this is going to be a fun season, because I just think that the insights we've gained and all the clarity we've gained I'm very excited to see where life goes as we're letting go.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I just feel like it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening because we're letting it.
Because we're letting it. So I think maybe a question to close out the episode to the listener is like, asking yourself, are you letting life unfold? Truly?
That is a good question to ask
think
yourself.
about.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Because I think that's something to like sit on or meditate on. I don't think it's a question for the mind.
I really like this question of kind of like, how am I getting in the way of life right now?
Either one, you know, how am I getting in the way?
Or how is the idea of me, of myself?
Yeah. Ooh, that can be a whole episode in itself. The idea of me.
Yeah, the idea of me.
The idea of me.
That's what I thought we were going to talk about today, but like, I don't
know what happened.
I don't know what we talked about.
Well, thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week. Probably a totally different episode than this one, but same concepts. So stay tuned for season 3. And
we got some fun guests lined up.
Yeah, we do. Oh, that's going to be interesting. As always, if you like this episode, if you like this podcast, rate it, review it on Apple Podcast. If you listen on Spotify, give us as many stars as you think that we deserve, hopefully 5, and share it with your friends. Send it to a family member, send it to a friend, and share it on your Instagram story if you like. We'll repost it and we will reach out and say thank you and connect with you. And also invite you to our community Zoom, which don't forget, that is tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Eastern.
Down below. Eastern. Yep. Down below. Go ahead and register for that. And until then, or until next week, question how you think about yourself and how it gets in the way.
Thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you in a week.